we're going to do a quick summary of ancient through 1300 to 1400 Gothic time period. So that's going to be just a quick summary. Let's go ahead and start off with Egypt. This is a civilization that is focused on death and immortalization. We see a lot of artwork that comes from the tombs that were created for the pharaohs. Lots and lots of artifacts, fresco paintings that were found on the walls give us information, good information about the civilization. If you can kind of keep in your mind that these civilizations are trying to make their image last forever, this is the focus of Egypt. And they actually do a good job because here we are looking at their sculpture. This was a common sculpture that was seen, and I'm going to talk about this one kind of in detail because this is the beginning of the figure. Notice how stylized they are, however. They look very rigid and unmoving, but this was a common view of the pharaoh, and in this case also includes his wife. Notice that they are attached to the stone at the base, and they have a stone column in between them. And notice that they don't have any arms protruding from the main core of the sculpture. This is because they didn't want anything to break off. Makes sense. It worked because this piece is all intact. One of the things you'll notice as we look at artwork later is that people have moving arms, and oftentimes they've lost an arm or they've lost a limb or head. So pay attention to that. Egyptians use a very hard stone, diorite, so that it does last forever. The main idea and significance of why is that they are trying to get a human man, the pharaoh, to reach a godlike status. So kind of the whole drive of this is that they are trying to turn the pharaoh into a god. This goes on for a long time, and we see change when we get to Greece. So some of the things that we see with Greece that we still have today are Greek philosophy, freedom, and creativity. So instead of seeing tombs, home for the dead, we see temples. So we see temples built to all of the Greek gods. This is the Parthenon, not to be confused with the Pantheon. Very easy to get confused. This is a main structure, architectural element from the Greek culture that you can still see today, although it's in quite a bit of ruins. The Greeks are concerned about harmony. They're trying to visually make things harmonious, so they change some of the structures to get that way. Theater is an important part of Greek society, so this is an example of what a theater would look like in Greek culture. There were many of them and could fit thousands, and they could still hear. Notice Greek architects and architecture is trying to work more with the landscape. So these theaters are half theaters. They're only a partial circle, and they're built into hillsides. This is kind of the epitome, the end, where we have gotten to in Greek sculpture. Notice this is a female nude, but we saw a lot of male nudes. The only reason she can be nude is because she is a goddess. This is Aphrodite. Notice that she has bent arms and legs, unlike our Egyptian statue. Notice that she has an S shape to her body. She has weight on that one side of her body, and the other leg is bent at the knee. This is called contrapposto. Notice how beautiful the detail is in the fabric. This is marble, and it doesn't look like hard stone. Notice that she's kind of free from the rock that's at the bottom. What I want you to remember about Greek statuary and Greek culture is that they are trying to bring the gods down into human form. So this is why Aphrodite can be nude in the bath. Some of the architecture that we see, switching gears a little bit, we see different column tops, if you will. So these are called capitals. The one on the left is Doric, the one in the middle is Ionic, and the one on the right is Corinthian. The Greeks use the Doric and Ionic column, and the Romans use all three. They use the Corinthian column, mostly was seen inside in Greek culture, but the Romans use it outside as well. So moving on to Romans, they are not so much interested in creativity, but they are very much the organizers, and they are interested in power and kind of taking over. If you know your history, you know that about the Romans. Looking at some architecture, one of the great inventions that the Romans come up with is concrete. So they are able to build quickly and cheaply, unlike previous civilizations. Just defining some of the vaults and architecture that we see, barrel vaults are the more simplistic ones on the left. You put two of those barrel vaults together, or four I should say, to create a groin vault. And then when you put more together, that creates a series or a set of them, usually called an arcade. And then this last one, we see the Pantheon, this dome structure that is probably the key architectural element for Rome. Here we have the Pantheon. It has an oculus in the middle that's just an open window, no glass. So if it rains, it just rains on the floor. And then we have the front facade picture of the Pantheon here in this image on the right. It's in the center, in the heart of Rome. It's surrounded by other buildings and restaurants, and there's always lots of people going on. This is kind of a combination structure. You have the porch where this triangular pediment is. You have this square block. It's called an intermediary block. And then you have this circular structure that's the dome at the back. Don't let this picture deceive you. These columns are humongous, and it takes about 5 people arm to arm to wrap your arms around those columns. So it's ginormous. The only way this could be built was with concrete. To get the top of this dome closed, the architects needed concrete. They used a combination of brick as well, but using concrete and then adding pumice in it, it's a very light stone, towards the top of the oculus enables them to build it. This becomes a structure for all of art later, an architectural feat that architects study even today. Rome is also known for, obviously, the Colosseum. So we see entertainment take a new level, unlike the Greeks, where they love the tragedy and they write creative plays. The Romans are more interested in, we all know, the games with the gladiator, but they're very much interested in entertainment, but it takes on a very serious and deadly role. Looking at the architecture, it is a very interesting structure, taking 2 theaters from Greece and putting them together to create a stadium, and this is where we get stadiums today. Rome's, as an organizer, they have a huge city. This is one of the biggest cities that we have seen thus far, and they have to bring in lots of water. So this is an aqueduct. They have clean water and support a large number of people and baths. One of the things that we see also are triumphal arches. Whenever one of the emperors would win a battle or build new roads, they would build this great triumphal arch to celebrate. So Romans are very interested in that. This is a bronze equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius, and it survives because it was thought to be Constantine. But this is a ginormous bronze sculpture, very hard to do, and it has survived from antiquity, and it influences all the following equestrian statues. Let's go ahead and move forward into the Byzantine or Middle Ages, and we see some different themes here. After the fall of Rome, society kind of spreads. We see a lot of centralized learning in monasteries. We see an influence from religion, and we see illuminated manuscripts. So a lot of the artwork is small, it's portable, it's devotional. We do see a lot of icons, and we don't see large artwork as much as we had done before. It's portable. Once Constantine has issued the Edict of Milan, it is safe for Christians to meet together, whereas in the later Roman times, think Nero, it was illegal for Christians to meet together to worship, and they were killed in mass. These are images from the catacombs, where we see early images of Christ, but not until the 2nd or 3rd century, so there were no images of him while he was alive. But these are lovely, simple, humble frescoes, mainly the Good Shepherd, stories that Jesus taught from while he was walking on this earth. And it oftentimes shows him young and beardless, but with sheep. Sometimes you see stories of the Old Testament like Abraham and Jonah and Noah. We rarely see God. We don't see God at all being depicted. You might see the hand of God. These images do become more sophisticated. These are some mosaic tiles in Ravenna, Italy. I should have said this image is in Rome, Italy, in the catacombs, because there were many, many, many tombs outside of Rome under the earth. But this mosaic is made from little tiles that used to have been used in sidewalks. But during this early Christian artwork time period, those mosaics were put up on the walls. They were rough glass meant to reflect light. So trying to create this holy celestial space. And a lot of these early ones were still showing a somewhat humble Christ. Notice a few things here with the cross and the halo, colors symbolizing Christ's divinity. He is here with sheep, so he's shown as the Good Shepherd here. As we get more towards the Byzantine time period, these images become more and more political, less humble Christ. This is Christ with a pure gold background, really trying to portray a heavenly realm. Notice their features are much flatter. This is becoming more used as a political message from Justinian, who becomes a ruler after Constantine. And then some images that we see after, much later. These are more icon images where you see this very typical Byzantine straightforward stare, where the eyes maybe don't show as much expression. And we also see, this is Christ as the Pantocrator, as kind of the ruler of the earth, and then Mary is underneath him. And we see lots of images of Mary. And these are very common Byzantine-like images. One of the biggest structures that we see is the Hagia Sophia. And this is a very large domed structure with multiple domes, circular rings called pendentives to keep that dome in place. It is now a museum. Let's move on to the more Middle Ages time period. This is a schematic of what a typical monastery might look like. So think all-inclusive. Everything can take place here. You have a kitchen, you have a place to eat, you have a cemetery, you have a farm. There is a place where you can write. So there are scribes here. There are artists who illuminate. These are where the first Bibles are handwritten, or books of the Bible. So one of those would be the Book of Kells, probably the most famous illuminated manuscript. And this is the first page. First pages are called carpet pages, and they would oftentimes be the most elaborate of those pages. Notice there's just all kinds of detail in here that we can't get into. This was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, so the first 4 books of the Bible. And this was meant to be a decorative book, but there would have been a scribe who would have written it, and then multiple illuminators, and many, many hours of work put into this. It is preserved now, and it is in the Trinity College Library in Dublin. Here's some detail from the Book of Kells. You can see all the different colors that are used, and these were all ground down natural pigments that would have been difficult to obtain. Let's move on to the Romanesque time period, where we see architecture take on a new role. We see barrel-vaulted stone churches. We see themes of judgment rather than forgiveness. And then we see a mass group of people called pilgrims, who are called by the Catholic Church to take these pilgrimages to see these different churches and relics that are in these cathedrals. This is an example of a common interior Romanesque church. Somewhere along the line in the Middle Ages, they lost the recipe for concrete. So we are no longer building with concrete, but with just stone, stone with a little bit of mortar in between. This is an example of a barrel vault. So you just have these curved arches kind of repeating all the way down the nave. The nave is the center aisle that's here. And this is a common pilgrimage church. It feels pretty dark. There's not a lot of stained glass. This gives you an idea of what the structure looks like. These look like early basilica churches that had been built based on a cross design. The nave is in the center as you walk towards the front. The transept is that crossing arm that's there. And this is a common Romanesque church. Let's talk about how it differs with Gothic. We see vaulted ceilings with pointed arches rather than curved arches. We see more stained glass, so not as dark interiors, and this idea of lux nova, which is like illuminated light. One of the reasons why this works is because visually, when you look at this diagram, which one looks taller? The one on the right does, with the pointed arch. So architects figured out that to make something taller, you can just deceive the eye and make it pointed so that it looks taller. These are actually the same height. But it does help to distribute the weight. So they start using pointed arches rather than round ones. And then they start using this other device called a flying buttress. So these arms that come off of the vaulted arches and shift the weight outside of the building. That way they can eliminate stone in the interior, put in more windows, and create more light inside the interior of the church. So we see Gothic churches going higher and higher, replacing stone with glass. And you generally always see the three doorways up at the front, but rather than stone, we see this beautiful rose window. So this is very classic Gothic. Oftentimes you find churches that have a combination of both, and that's because you sometimes, that church was beginning its or ending its building in a certain time period. So you sometimes have a combination.